There are 389 bills and 34 resolutions that the legislature looked at this year. So even though the Family Heritage Alliance were on 20 of them, I want you to know we looked at 394 bills and 34 resolutions. There wasn't a single one that got by us. We were watching them, we were paying attention to them, but we actively pursued 20 of them. And we're going to walk through that. In fact, folks, it's going to feel like we're back in the dump truck and dumping the whole load on you. We are, because we want you out of here at 1 o'clock today. Okay? So let's keep right on going. There were 12 bills at the Family Heritage Alliance action that we supported. 9 of those bills passed, 3 of those bills failed, and 2 of the 3 that failed did make it through at least one chamber. That's very important because with that kind of momentum, there's no reason it shouldn't come back next year, tweaked, maybe in a better fashion. So we're grateful for that. I'd like to share with you the 3 bills that failed. First of all, front and center is Senate Bill 115. This was our Student Privacy Act. This was the 1008 of last year, the Student Privacy Act of last year. 115 was a good bill. It was ready for prime time. We more than appreciated our 2 sponsors in Senator Lance Russell from Hot Springs, Representative Tom Bruner from the Nislin-Newell area just north of us. These were 2 great sponsors. They were passionate about our issues. They were ready to go with Senate Bill 115. In fact, folks, we had done our homework. We were actively pursuing different angles to present this bill to the legislatures. I'll let Norman talk.
And so one of the things we did this year is last year at the Capitol, a lot of the rhetoric around 1008 from the legislators that didn't really want to vote for it was that it's not a problem here and that the students don't want this. There's no young people here asking us for 1008, the Student Privacy Act. And so what we did this year is we knew that was a bunch of baloney, that there are no South Dakota students that want this, but we didn't have any right there looking them in the face telling them that. So this year, we worked harder at getting students ready to come to the Capitol so they can look them in the eye and say, we want this. So this is Riley. She's from Rapid City, Stevens, I believe, a junior. And Alliance Defending Freedom, who is one of our biggest national allies, said, hey, if you find a good spokesperson, let us know. We're flying kids to D.C. We're going to train them. So we were one of 5 or 6 states that flew a student out to D.C. They spent an entire day being trained on how to talk about this issue. Fake radio interviews, fake TV interviews, the whole 9 yards. Riley was totally ready to go for committee hearings and then to go after that to work the floor. Because it's kind of easy for a representative or senator to look at Dale and I and say no. It's a lot harder to look a 17-year-old girl in the eye when she says, protect my locker room. It's a lot harder to say no. So that's what we were trying to do with Riley. And you should have your postcard in the packet, just a sample of one of the postcards we printed up for that.
We also went online and we did some work with the media online on this issue. Let's see. Okay. And so we did our work across the state of South Dakota. And many of you know, before 115 hit committee, we withdrew 115. And so why did we do that? I mean, the Student Privacy Act is a front burner issue with a lot of South Dakota grandparents and parents and students alike. Why was 115 withdrawn before the very first committee? Here's why, folks. Norman and I had made our way over to the Capitol 3 weeks prior to this session. We met with the governor's staff in order to give them a heads up, which is protocol, it's proper, it's respectful, to let them know what's coming. We were led to believe, we believed that if 115 was different than 1008, that the governor's office would take a sincere look at it again and not just assume it's 1008 veto, like they did, like what happened last year. So we felt pretty good about it. We had done our homework, we had 2 great sponsors, we were ready to rock and roll. We dropped 115. As soon as it dropped, the very next day, a press conference was held in which the governor made very certain that if 115 hit his desk, it would be vetoed. It was going nowhere, all right? And so when that happened, we were apologized to because we were supposed to have been given a hearing and we weren't given a hearing. But when that happened, it really took the wind out of the sails of some of our most ardent supporters on the Student Privacy Act. So that was one blow. to 115. But there was a second blow. That second blow didn't have anything to do with 115, but it had a lot to do with the heart of the legislator, and that is Initiative Measure 22. Initiative Measure 22 was passed last year, November the 8th, by the people of South Dakota by about 52% of the vote. So it barely got enough to pass. The Family Heritage Alliance was all over defeating 22. Why? Because it was bad law. IM 22 was 34 pages long, 14,000 words, 70, that's 70 different sections. Very few South Dakotans looked at, read, contemplated 22 in its entirety before they went to the polls and voted, I dare say. 22 would have hurt the Family Heritage Alliance. We voiced our opinion against it. But I'll tell you what, folks, when the legislature was looking to repeal and replace IM 22, it was exhausting for the legislators. And we have several in the House here today. And it was just exhausting for them. So not only did we have the governor's almost promised veto, but we also had a fatigued, emotionally fatigued legislature dealing with that heavy issue of IM 22. And then, as though the perfect storm against our bill, was a third issue. And the third issue had to do with an ethics challenge or an ethics charge against one of the legislators. And that legislator ended up withdrawing, resigning from the House. But it was hard. It was emotionally difficult for the legislators to deal with this issue on top of everything else. So it was a perfect storm. It came against us in delivering in a thoughtful, energetic, passionate way SB 115. And so with the encouragement of the leadership of the House and the Senate and our own two sponsors, we withdrew 115. That to say this issue is not going away. This issue is front burner for the Family Heritage Alliance, and I know for you. We have begun hearing from school districts all across the state of South Dakota that this is an issue that matters. In fact, just today in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so I just read this morning. I remember last year someone was coming up to me and said, Norman, we need to fight harder. Whenever the other side sees something they don't like, they sue them right away. There's all these lawsuits of the other side. They're always suing us. And we're always too nice to sue them back. And so what I saw this morning, so in Pennsylvania a little while ago, a boy is changing in the locker room. As he's changing, a girl walks by half-dressed. He goes to his principal or school administrator, I don't remember which, and complains about it, saying, hey, that's not cool. He's told that he needs to grow accustomed to it and make it seem as natural as possible. If he doesn't like it, he can use one of the nurses' restrooms. And another member of the staff said that if he doesn't like that option, he should just be homeschooled. Yesterday, Alliance Defending Freedom filed suit.
So our friends at ADF are going to the mat on this issue, and will be coming back with this issue. We don't know what it will look like next year. Friends, quite frankly, we may have to wait till 2019 when we have a different governor seated in the governor's mansion, in the governor's office, one that would be maybe more friendly to the cause of the privacy of every student in a very prudent and wise way in the state of South Dakota. But stay tuned. This issue is not going away with us, and so we appreciate your support. I'd like to take you to the next one, and that's Senate Bill 55.
So Senate Bill 55, if you read the news, injected religion and crazy weird science theories into the classroom. That's what it did if you read the news. If you read the bill, it was about this long, and it says that teachers who discuss scientific information in their curriculum can't be penalized if they talk about the fact that there may be weaknesses to that curriculum. And I had even some of our friends saying, well, yeah, but you're kind of trying to get creationism in the schools eventually, right? No, we weren't even going that far. All we were saying is things like evolution, global warming, things like that, that's in the curriculum that the teachers have to teach, they can't be penalized if they talk about the fact that there may be weaknesses to that theory. We're not saying you have to teach the students that it's a bad theory, or other theories, but the teacher simply can't be penalized if they talk about the fact that there may be weaknesses. But that's not what the media said.
Next, I'd like to share with you 93. 93 was a bill that we supported, an act to adjust the marriage license fee. Basically, what this bill would do is in South Dakota, our marriage license fee is set at $40. It has been $40 for the last 29 years. Folks, $10 of that $40 goes to the county for administrative purposes. $30 of that $40 goes to domestic violence programming in the state of South Dakota. Well spent $40. Senator Rush, who is a former judge, he has had a heartache because one of the main heartaches of his being a judge was the fact he'd be on the dais in any of his courtrooms, and he'd have to deal with divorce situations. And when there's children involved, it's especially difficult. Senator Rush came to us and said, I've got an idea that would encourage premarital counseling, premarital education. His idea was this: since it's been 29 years since there's been a fee increase, take that $40, go to $60 for the marital license fee, and then drop it down to $40 if a couple planning to get married desires to find premarital counseling and gets premarital counseling. So it was an incentive to get premarital counseling. We felt this was good and right, and this was prudent. We supported it. It got through the Senate in a strong fashion, but not the Senate, not the House Education Committee. So here was the problem. There are those that equate a fee to a tax, and because they equate a fee to a tax, it wasn't going to sell. We respect that opinion, all right? And so it died on the House side. That's not to say that this issue is going to go away. We've already visited with Judge Rush about the possibility of bringing it back as a simple resolution to say the heart, the intent, the will of the legislature is that every couple in the state of South Dakota, before saying I do and tying the knot, would find themselves in premarital counseling somewhere. So we may be able to bring this bill back next year. We'll see. We were really excited this year about our South Dakota Ministry Leaders Capital Summit. We flew into the state, this gentleman, J.C. Church from Ohio, with the Family Research Council, and he blessed us in a big way. 130 ministry leaders from across the state gathered in Pierre. And don't you know it makes a difference when they show up at the state capitol? So it was a blessing for us, it was a blessing for them, and we already look forward to next year's Capital Summit when pastors and ministry leaders hop on the bus and come make their way to Pierre to the People's House. It's just a wonderful thing to see happen. There were 4 resolutions that we supported this year. 3 of the 4 passed, 1 failed. The one that failed was withdrawn by the sponsor themselves. So let's take a look at these 4.
Okay, so the first one is SCR2, and it's pretty simple. So after this last election, we saw a push to say, hey, we need to scrap the Electoral College because America really wanted Hillary, because that's where the popular vote was, so that's what we need to go to, is the popular vote now. I've even heard a lot of people in South Dakota say that. But if you take a look at this next map, that's half of the U.S. population in those little blue dots. And if you look at the Trump-Hillary map, it looked kind of similar. I don't think it's on the slide program, but it looks kind of similar to that one. So when you say America really wanted Hillary, and then you look at the Trump-Hillary breakout of the United States, it's not necessarily the case. So this resolution simply says, we as a South Dakota legislature, we want to stick with the Electoral College. So that's SCR2.
And the sound system agrees with us.
I think they call that a mic drop.
Yeah,
I just didn't drop it.
And so we appreciated this resolution, appreciate bringing it, because there is a push nationwide to go to the popular vote, but South Dakota has said, no way, no shape, no how.
So, see your mic.
Okay. Next resolution we'd like to show you is this resolution here. It's a resolution recognizing the harmful effects of pornography when it comes to and categorizing it as a public health crisis. Folks, this was an important resolution for us. We saw that the state of Utah last year was the very first state to run this resolution. It was strongly worded. It really spoke to the essence that pornography is hurting our families and individuals in the great state of South Dakota. So it was a hurt was a harm. We really appreciate our two sponsors for this bill. Our sponsor in the Senate was Jenna Netherton. Our sponsor in the House was Representative Taffy Howard. With the flair of excellence, they spoke to this resolution on the Senate floor, on the House floor, and by the way, who could say no to these two lovely ladies? And so it passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, and it made national news when it did. I'd like to share with you that we were supportive of, in fact, we brought the resolution opposing physician-assisted suicide. In the state of South Dakota, we already have four statutes on the books that outlaw assisted suicide, not to mention physician-assisted suicide, just any assisted suicide. So there is a group called Compassion and Choices that are pushing this issue nationwide. South Dakota was one of those states that they're looking at. In fact, it is very likely that the issue of supporting physician-assisted suicide will be on the ballot in 2018. What we wanted to do in bringing this resolution is to fire a shot across the bow of those who would think this is a good idea to say, wait a moment, and look at the vote on that. 32-3 and 67-1. Our legislator still believes in the culture of life, and we're grateful for that. We had two great sponsors carry this bill for us, in Dr. Blake Curd on the Senate side and Dr. Leslie Heineman on the House side. There was a doctor in the House and a doctor in the Senate, and we so appreciated them carrying this resolution. It sends a strong message, and we will use this resolution throughout the year. I find it interesting that the country of Canada has already approved physician-assisted suicide just several years ago, but just this last week, this news came out. Second thoughts on assisted suicide, Canadian doctors are beginning to balk. If assisted suicide is such a good thing, why are so many Canadian doctors having second thoughts? Well, friends, that's because if you read the articles on this, they're saying no more, no more. It is so horrendous on so many levels. And so we'll be out in the forefront. If this thing makes it to the ballot by Compassion and Choices, if it makes it to the ballot, you can count on the Family Heritage Alliance to be leading the charge opposing such a thing for the state of South Dakota. We'd like to take a moment and look at the 9 bills that did pass that we supported. These 2 bills deal with IM-22. 1069 repealed was a total repeal of IM-22 and was supported strongly. And then Senate Bill 171, an act to establish a task force on campaign financing. We felt this was prudent and wise. Cooler heads will prevail this summer when they sit down, and hopefully they'll bring some very prudent, wise pieces of legislation next year to the legislature in the area of campaign finance. The bottom line is IM-22 was a bad piece of law, needed to be repealed, needed to be replaced with good law, and hopefully we'll see that happen this next legislative session.
So 1122 is a tweak to basically the homeschool process. Right now, as soon as you submit your application to the school board, you are allowed to homeschool. As soon as you submit your application. The problem is, if someone's new to the area, when you submit an application, what do? In a normal process, you wait for approval. Well, this application serves as a notification. The homeschoolers that have been homeschooling here for a long time know that. Most of the school boards know that. But every once in a while, you get, for example, a military family moves in, submits their application, and thinks they have to wait. Or we've had school boards call parents and say, you know, there was a problem with your application, and now it's been so long you're truant. Well, that's not the case, because in South Dakota, that application serves as just a notification. So all the bill did was tweak those 2 words. So now you turn in a notification. So now everybody knows, plain and simple, you're not asking to homeschool, you're just saying, hey, we're going to homeschool. And then SB 81, an act to prohibit the manufacture, sale, or possession of powdered alcohol. It's just what it sounds like. It's alcohol in powdered form. You mix it in whatever liquid you want. The problem is all of our laws deal with alcohol in a liquid form. So right now, if alcohol is prohibited on whatever areas, powdered alcohol isn't. And there's some question of, you know, the safety of it, how much you should put in, et cetera, so you can mix it as potent as you want or whatever. But none of our laws deal with it. Nobody knows a whole lot about it. You get it off of Amazon, so theoretically anybody could go off of Amazon and just buy it, because our laws say that you have to be 21 to drink liquid alcohol. So this bill basically said, hey, let's just not have it in our state. I believe about half the states have already done this. So just kind of a preemptive of saying we don't want people buying powdered alcohol off of Amazon right now. Okay, 1118, eliminate the use of, or the need to prove force, fraud, or coercion in the human trafficking of minors. Why is that important? If you've got a 16, 17-year-old girl that's caught up in all of this, she may not realize that she's been forced or coerced. Chances are she was groomed from a young age, and so it's really hard to prove coercion and force when she thinks she's just playing along. And she doesn't feel forced until maybe one day she realizes that. But proving that she was forced or coerced into this is really hard when a lot of times they've been groomed from 14, 15, and now they're 16. And so this basically says if you're dealing with human trafficking, you don't have to prove force, fraud, coercion if we're dealing with a minor. Just makes it a little easier to get the conviction. And then 1143, another little bit of a tweak, basically says, so age of consent right now in South Dakota is 16. If someone is caught in prostitution and they're 15 or younger, you're not going to charge them with prostitution. We're dealing with human trafficking here. 16 is the age of consent, and so it basically says, hey, if you're under that, you can't consent to any of this, so we're definitely not going to charge you with prostitution. We're dealing with human trafficking here. So just definitely clarifies that, just to make things a little clearer. And on the same topic, we've got SB 102, an act to require the name, telephone number of a human trafficking organization be put on the information that a woman gets when she's seeking an abortion. Right now with our informed consent laws, there's a packet of information and some certain things that the doctor or nurse has to tell her, that she's required by law to tell that mother. And so what we added to that is a piece of paper or a pamphlet or a card. The DSS decides what it actually gets to look like, but it's just a piece of paper with the name and phone number that the girl can call or text if by chance she's in that abortion clinic because she's wrapped up in human trafficking.
And that's a very, this was a very important bill. The Family Heritage Alliance, for the last 5 years, the issue of human trafficking has been an issue been on our front burner. We're very concerned about this. But we more than appreciate Representative Lynn DeSanto for bringing this bill and bringing just an emotional tug, but a truth tug to the committee process and to the floor of the House. Lynn is in the House here today. Lynn, will you stand? Let's thank Lynn. You pick it.
So one of the things that you may not be aware of is Representative DeSanto brought a witness to both committee hearings. And this was a lady that had been trafficked for many years. And this was the first time telling her story, and she does it on public record with cameras in the room. Took a lot of guts. And part of the reason that her testimony was so compelling in regards to this bill is she said that during the time she was trafficked, she started noticing the billboards and the pamphlets on human trafficking. And she said, eventually I started taking pictures of everyone that I saw. Every billboard, every pamphlet, etc. And I waited for the time when I'd be able to call or text. And so if you've got someone saying that, hey, every time I saw the billboard, I got a little bit closer. Why not give them one more chance, one more time to see that piece of paper and for them to think, am I being forced to do this? And I have someone that I can call. So again, thanks to Representative DeSanto for that one. Moving on, HB 1101, this one was a little bit of a tweak. So last year we passed pain capable, which basically says if a child in the womb is capable of feeling pain, you can't abort it. It's 20 weeks. And what we had to do in order to get that bill through was to bring the penalty down to a class 1 misdemeanor, I believe. Just a compromise that we had to make last minute to get the bill through. So we came back this year, it was we moved it to a class 6 felony, which is consistent with all of our other abortion penalties. So it just brings a lot of consistency. It made a lot of sense. But last year we had to make a last minute tweak to get the bill through. So this year we came back and just fixed the penalty, make it more consistent.
Want to take a moment? Yes, thank you. Want to take a moment and talk about 149. This is no secret, I hope, to everyone in the room. 149, an act to protect our faith-based adoption agencies from government discrimination. 2 years ago, Catholic Social Services approached the Family Heritage Alliance asking for this protection that 149 brings them. Last year, both Catholic Social Services and Bethany Christian Services approached us and asked us, pleaded for us, look, find some legislation that will protect us so that we can simply continue doing what we have been doing in child placement for adoptions and foster placement in the state of South Dakota for decades. Well, in our research, we found that the state of Michigan had passed such a law. And that law was passed in North Carolina, in North Dakota, and one other state, Virginia. So 3 states have passed a like law to protect faith-based adoption agencies. We took that law, we tweaked it to South Dakota statute, we did some other tweaking, we brought alongside of us Catholic Social Services, Bethany Christian Services, and one other out of Sioux Falls, New Horizons Adoption Agency. And then we brought ADF to the forefront. ADF has been, Alliance Defending Freedom, a huge support group as well. And so this bill was brought, 149. 149 had its detractors. The ACLU came against it. The Human Rights Watch came against it. Equality South Dakota came against it. The South Dakota social workers came against it. But that's okay because we had all of you. And don't you know that right is might? And so we were on the right side of this issue. We more than appreciate our 2 sponsors. Our sponsors in Senator Ellen Solano from Rapid City and Representative Stephen Haugard from Sioux Falls. Both of these men were passionately invested in this bill. Both of them help us walk it through the Senate and then walk it through the House in strong fashion. We did our homework on this bill. But we had the help of these folks. You see Norman on your left there. Next to Norman is Jim Kenyon. Jim is the West River Catholic Social Services Director. Next to Jim is our Senator Ellen Solano. Next to him is Troy Cummings. We flew Troy in from Michigan. Bethany Christian Services is located in Michigan, headquartered in Michigan, and he is their top attorney on this issue. So he flew in when the Senate was dialoguing this, gave testimony, and then helped us work the Senate floor. Next to Troy, the lady there is Renee Egebrotten. Renee is the director of the West River Bethany Christian Services, and then next to is me. So this is a team along with how we appreciate Concerned Women for America, and also now pictured there, of course, is Representative Stephen Haugard.
Can I just say something on this before we move? So you know how when you're on the right track and you just know it, doors just kind of keep opening? And then sometimes in other areas of your life, you feel like you have to keep shoving doors open? Well, a lot of times in the legislature, you almost feel like you're always shoving doors open, even if they're open. But with 149, a couple of the things, the doors that just flew open that I want to share with you because they're really cool. So, Senator Solano, a lot of times when you've got a bill, it's easy to get a good sponsor if you've got a good bill. But a few aspects about Senator Solano that you maybe don't know is, first of all, he's highly respected on the floor. So remember how Dale was talking about the perfect storm against 115? We kind of had the perfect storm in Senator Solano. 1, he's highly respected on the floor. 2, he's highly respected in the governor's office. 3, he has a friendship with Jim Kenyon of Catholic Social Services, the very person the bill tries to protect. You can't make this stuff up. Then you look at Troy Cummings, the top attorney for Bethany. He's sitting giving testimony. You know, you see he's got a nice fitted suit, slick back hair, giving perfect testimony. And then towards the end, he goes, and the reason I'm involved in this is because I'm an adoptive father. I have 2 adopted children. And everyone on the committee, you could just, huh? You're supposed to be the slick attorney. But he comes and says, no, I'm an adoptive father. I'm not just the attorney, so that's why I'm here. And you see Renee and the New Horizons and the adoption agencies basically look at the bill and go, yeah, this is perfect. We want this. What do you need from us? And so when you're doing the right thing and you're on the right track, a lot of the doors sometimes just open, and that's what we saw with 149.
Time and time again, we saw what the media had done to it. The media began to spin this in a direction that you'd read what the media wrote and you go, well, this isn't even 149. This isn't even the bill. We appreciate so much our work that we did across the state. We wrote an op-ed piece that was not only in the Argus Leader, but the Rapid City Journal, and we sent it to 200 media outlets across the state of South Dakota. We also went on social media. Norman?
Okay, so I think the next slide here. So one thing last year with 1008 that I noticed is if you Google hashtag 1008 HB 1008 on Twitter or something like that, you got a whole bunch of postcards from the other side of how horrible it was. There was almost nothing on our side. And so I saw that and I was like, that's a little bit dumb. They're not the only ones that have opinions on this. They just had more money and they were putting out more postcards. So again, Dale mentioned the Twitter page, I think a little earlier. So what I tried to do this year is make more postcards like this. I had one for each of our major bills. A couple of them were withdrew, so they didn't get a lot of airtime. But things like this, so that now if you Google hashtag SB149, you don't just get all the postcards saying how bad of a bill it is. You get the other side as well, hopefully. It's just a few postcards, just an attempt, but that was a little bit of the direction I was going, just to show that there's our side as well when you Google things.
Well, yesterday I knew that something was happening because all of a sudden I started getting some texts and emails from my colleagues in the other 39 family policy councils across the state congratulating us on the passage of 149. Come to find out, it was about an AP Wire News article that went national, and it simply reads, well, first of all, we do thank Governor Dugard and in a big way for signing 149. It was the last bill that he signed on the 10th of March, but how grateful we are that he signed it, and he's pleased that he signed it, he's grateful that he signed it, and I think we need to give it up to our Governor Dugard for signing 149. But yesterday, this hit the wire. San Francisco bars traveled to South Dakota for city employees. Maybe you read that, it's a front page of the Rapid City Journal today as well. So basically, we're on their no-fly zone here in South Dakota. So we join 4 other states that have been banned by San Francisco. And I'll tell you what, folks, one of my colleagues from North Carolina said, Dale, wear this news as a feather in your cap. And I think he's right.
I saw one of the comments underneath that news article from someone in Wyoming, and they said, wait, you've got Californians that won't come to your state now? How does Wyoming get one of them bills?
Next, please. And just yesterday, Gary Bauer, many of you met at our stand banquet, Gary Bauer wrote in American Values this statement, so follow along, please. Last week, Justice, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito addressed an audience of Catholic lawyers and judges. He warned them a wind is picking up that is hostile to those with traditional moral beliefs. Justice Alito predicted pitched battles in courts and Congress, state legislators, and town halls over matters of faith and public policy that were once widely shared values. He called on men and women of faith to evangelize our fellow Americans about the issue of religious liberty. Sadly, Justice Alito is right. There is no doubt about the increasing hostility toward traditional Judeo-Christian values. He's right, you know, and that's exactly why the Family Heritage Alliance exists and why you're here today, because we are stronger and better together because we stand on our traditional values, and 149 was nothing more than that. It was a religious freedom bill. We stand strong on it, and now these faith-based adoption agencies and foster placement agencies can continue what they're doing and flourish in South Dakota unhampered, unhindered, undiscriminated against, because 149 was passed and our governor signed it. We're grateful. So, folks, this year we're grateful every Wednesday morning to hold the Catacomb Caucus in the governor's large conference room. Some 40 of legislators from across the aisle and Capitol guests made their way. And then on Tuesday mornings, the a Catholic Bible study was being held, and Norm and I were invited, and that room was just packed all the way around. How grateful we are to our Catholic friends for including us and for them coming to our events as well. So we're grateful for that camaraderie. There were 4 bills that we opposed during the legislative session, and I am honored to say that all 4 of these failed. So let's just take a brief look at the 4. The first two were education bills. What they did was they supported the idea of a pre-kindergarten pilot program and then a council to review that pilot program. Folks, the Family Heritage Alliance will always oppose government-sponsored pre-K for our school system. This pilot program would have included 3-year-olds on up in this government pre-K program. We say it's wrong on so many levels, and we are grateful to the Senate Ed Committee for saying no to these two pre-K bills on a strong vote of 6-1.
I think when I was 3, I was still eating mud.
Yes. Next slide, please. Like to share concerning these two.
Okay, so 1125. A lot of you will remember last year we passed 159, which was the Partners in Education Tax Credit. Basically set up a program for scholarships for low-income families to make private school an option. It opened up the door for a lot of people that just simply couldn't even look at private school. Well, now there was a mechanism to get scholarship money to those families. It's one of the most complicated bills we've ever worked on. My eyes rolled back in my head every time I listened to it explained, but I tried real hard. So what this year, 1125 sought to do is make public the donor information to those scholarships. There's 5 insurance companies that made donations to that scholarship fund, one of which asked to remain anonymous. 1125 sought to make those names public. And a concept that after I am 22, the biggest word this year we heard was transparency. Everybody wants transparency in everything, which I could agree with, except one representative made a really clear point. Transparency is for government, privacy is for people. Amen. 1125 dealt with private donations. So he said, hold up, these are private companies making a donation to a fund. Don't make that information public. 1200, a little bit similar. Privacy is for people, transparency is for government. So again, transparency was the big issue. So 1200 comes. It basically says any organization that spends more than $50,000 on a ballot issue has to release their top donors in a list. Again, we're talking about people there. Private donations. Privacy is for people. What they were going for is, like with things like IM22, all the out-of-state money that poured in. And they said, we want to know who that is. But we said, what about us? What if we put a lot of money into a ballot issue? Then next end banquet, we have to say, hey guys, donate a lot, but we may have to put you on a public list someday. Not cool. Private donations should be private. So thankfully, 1200 failed.
Okay, next slide, please. We so appreciate those of you that went to our legislative radar, and you can follow all these bills if you want to look deeper into them at our legislative radar. Want to encourage you, as always, to pray for our country, her leadership from the White House to the county courthouse to the schoolhouse. Folks, it is 1 o'clock. We'd like to ask you to stand with us. It won't sound like the rotunda, will it? But close to it, all right? Let's make this our closing prayer today as we remember. And it's been an honor to have been here with you. Norman and I will be hopping in the car, making our way to Sioux Falls, and we'll meet there with a packed room of your friends in the Sioux Falls area as well, and do this again. Let's sing together. God bless everyone. Have a good afternoon.